Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of Trading On Up, which we haven't done in like over a year. I'm Paul,
And I'm Dave.
and this week we're discussing the first volume of The Department of Truth. This volume entitled "The End of the World," because it has to have a fucking cherry title. This volume is written by James Tinian IV, with art by Martin Simmons. Now, let's get this out of the way first. What did you think of the art in this book? Because it's not going to be for everyone.
The art has an interesting kind of style to it, and I can't specifically relate it to certain artists or other sorts of things, but it has a particular realistic yet etched style where there's lots of smeared pencil lines, splashes of different color. Um, on whole, it matched up fairly good with the aesthetic of the story that was being told, just to match with everything. But no, on whole, it wasn't anything that really turned me away from the story.
Okay, okay. Like that's one of the things with this book that always kind of made it hard for me to recommend to people because I'm like, oh, a lot of people aren't going to jive with this art because it's very much its own thing. It it kind of, and this isn't a great example, and I know you're not going to be familiar with the artist, but for anybody who is, it kind of reminds me of like a Ben Templesmith,
Hmm.
who I know you're not familiar with, Dave, but I'm going to just send you one of his images, and then you can kind of see what I'm talking about. If I can find one here that will work. There, this is Ben Templesmith, and you'll be able to kind of see what I'm talking about. There's some similarity there.
I can see it a bit from in there.
Yeah. Okay. So, Dave, what was the story of this volume?
Well, let's see.
Because it's not complicated at all.
Well, the main story follows the events of a gentleman by the name of Cole Turner
Yes.
with his interactions, uh, discoveries, and induction into the Department of Truth, a
Yes.
society that works with working its best to trying to keep those weird conspiracy theories that you typically sort of hear about kind of under control. Quite literally, because within this book and this reality, it's the case of anything that people believe in a majority is what becomes truth.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it
So
could cause some interesting implications.
yeah. So if enough people believe that the Earth is flat, then the Earth becomes flat, and it always was flat. Is basically the premise of the book. Like that's an example they use very early on.
Very early on, the first story, in fact.
Yeah. The first issue is about them discovering that the Earth is flat because to the people in that plane at that time, the Earth is flat, so it becomes flat. And I think it's a really cool concept for a book. And I want to read more of it because I started reading this in single issues when it was published initially, but I fell off after a while, so I'm gonna have to pick up the second volume at some point. Um, yeah, so the one of the things you didn't mention that I'll bring up quickly is the director for the Department of Truth is Lee Harvey Oswald, which I think is a great little touch.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm sure you're familiar with who Lee Harvey Oswald is.
Yes, vaguely. One of
Okay.
the particular challenges within this particular book is that I had understanding of the particular world events that they added within the story, but I'm not super knowledgeable in the specific conspiracies that they did touch on or how sort of deep they went into it.
I don't think you really need to know much about it, about any particular conspiracy. Like Harvey Oswald is a guy who shot JFK.
Mhm.
Now, some people believe that he had help. Some people believe that he was helped by the CIA or the FBI or the mob, or there's a million different theories about what all happened there, but
Mm.
yeah, as long as you kind of have who he is, I think that's really all you need. So, I have to ask, Dave, would you read another volume of this?
Mm.
Because it's not exactly something I would expect you to kind of, because it's very kind of like almost like an X-Files kind of thing with conspiracies and that kind of stuff. And I don't think that's normally your cup of tea.
At the very most, with running through the story, at the very least, it's intriguing. It's not something that left me tremendously bored, but it's not something that I would seek out fervently.
Fair enough.
I can at very least recommend this to someone who enjoys the, I wouldn't quite say mystery, but again, like you said, either X Files or one of the comments on the back of the book mentioned Men in Black sort of detective style story,
Yeah,
running through the kind of working through the situation, figuring out the issue to the problem in that sort of case.
yeah, yeah.
I think this with this story, it has interesting aspects, but again, it's nothing that immediately pulls me in and wants me to see more immediately. I wouldn't be against looking into it, but it's nothing that I would search out on my own time.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I mean, that's completely fair. I was kind of like, I'd read it, like I said, I'd read the first little bit previously, and I was like, I don't know. This is like a 50-50 on if Dave will like it or not. But
Hmm.
yeah. Anyway, I quite enjoyed it for anybody who hasn't figured that out yet. Yeah, I really think James Tinian the Fourth is a really good writer. I like the artwork because it's very unique and very different than most things you're gonna see. Um, but yeah, I fully recommend it, but with that caveat of it's not going to be for everyone.
Hmm. I think the only other particular thing is if there are any particular people that are a bit iffy about having to switch their style of reading for going through specific comics and whatnot, you might need to be ready because there's a couple sections of the story where it switches from typical panel style to having to read lines through a double page spread.
Oh yeah, there are a couple of moments where like they change up like the panel layouts and stuff. That's
Mhm.
very much true. Yeah, yeah. I
Like
didn't
it
even.
was one of the things that I remember reading through and then kind of like, wait a minute, how did they jump so? Oh, okay, they spread it through both of the pages.
Yeah, no, that's actually a very good thing to bring up because like for me as someone who's read comics for 20 plus years, I didn't notice that. I'm just like, yeah, well, yeah, of course that's how it's laid out. That's how it's laid out. But yeah, no, that's a really good thing to bring up.
And in my case, it's the case of it took me a moment. It's like, oh, okay, they changed the style.
Yeah, yeah, no, fair enough. That's a good point. So Dave, I think I have our next book to read for next month because I think we'll try to do something like this maybe once a month. That might be kind of fun. Uh,
See how it goes.
so for everyone who wants to read along with us, next month we're going to look at a book called Deadly Class, and we're going to just do the first volume. Are you? I'm assuming you're not going to be familiar with Deadly Class, David.
Just from the sounds of it, I think I can pick up the concept, but I'm not exactly sure if it's something I remember seeing or if it's something different entirely.
So there was a there was a TV series of it, but I don't know how long it lasted or what happened with it because I think I only watched the first episode. Oh yeah, it only got I think one season. But basically, the first little bit is going to follow this boy who is living on the streets and finds himself eventually enrolled in a school of assassins.
Radios then.
It's a from memory. Again, this is one of those ones where I've read the first volume, but I don't think I read anything past that. So it'll be fun to go back and explore it again. And I remember it being probably something more in line with something you would enjoy. The it has a cleaner art style, which didn't seem to bother you about this one, but it's a much more like there's a lot less like there's not the whole I guess there's a bit of conspiracy stuff in it, but it's a lot more straightforward and yeah. Anyway, until next time, I'm Paul.
And I'm Dave.